Y'all, what's up, man? Welcome to the channel. This is the Podcast with Soul. You can check us out on Spotify, the Podcast with Soul, YouTube, the Podcast with Soul, Instagram, the Podcast with Soul. This video, I want to give a shout out to my man Rand, former assistant district attorney in Fulton County in Atlanta, Georgia. Came on my platform to discuss the big Meech situation and the whole situation with the BMF. Neither Rand nor myself do we wish to slander, libel, defame, or hurt anybody with what we discuss in this particular video. Everything that Rand is going to discuss is coming from his real practical experience of working the case. Everything that I discuss and Rand, and he mentions it, is public information. You can download all of this information on pacer.gov. Me and Rand and other people that come on my platform. But in this particular case, me and Rand have differing opinions on the various behaviors and choices and speculations of what may or may not have happened with the different people involved in this case, and that's okay. Me and Rand don't have to agree, right? We can disagree without being disagreeable. I know in this day and time, if everybody doesn't agree with this person or everybody doesn't agree with that person, it has a tendency to create bad blood. You like ketchup on your hot dog. I don't want ketchup on my hot dog. I like mustard. You can eat your hot dog with the ketchup. I can eat my hot dog with the mustard, and we can still be respectful and we can still be cordial. So with that being said, I want to give a shout out to my man Rand. Shout out to his son Raiden. This is a dope interview. And like I say, all of this is before the St. Louis investigation. We talk a little bit about it, but this has nothing to do with the federal St. Louis investigation. This deals mostly with the initial wiretaps of the BMF organization in Atlanta, Georgia, which leads to Big Meech. And like I say, me and Rand, we don't agree on the way we see things in this case, but that's okay. He's still my man. Sean G, hope you enjoyed the video. Peace. So Rand, we were talking about Cuffy, and then you was talking about the third party cooperation, and then I said that, I spoke to Keith Cromer, and he said that it was their policy, him and the U.S. attorney, not to do third party, and you were getting into the Tammy Cowens, Cuffy, Meech thing.
Sure. So, and that's what I was going to say, and I think at this time, I think the guidelines had become simply advisory at that point. Because at one point, the federal guidelines were compulsory. You had to sentence per the guidelines. But I want to say, by the time we're talking post-2011, that the guidelines, I'm pretty sure, the guidelines they were still a guidance, an advisory, but they weren't required to.
The judge could do an upward departure or downward departure, whatever they felt.
Basically, you could do whatever you wanted. That it went back to the statutory maximum, the statutory framework. Northern District, of course, was still following guidelines, and I think they still, for all intents and purposes, do. Because, again, you have a system that's been in place forever. How do you do it? But third-party cooperation, it would have been a tough sell. And that's, so, and from Meech's point of view,
he's sitting in there doing 30 years.
Yeah, it's like in Goodfellas. Remember Goodfellas? So remember Ray? You remember Goodfellas?
Yeah.
Remember Ray Liotta? He's in prison for the first time, and Karen brings him the drugs, and she's all pissed because his gumad is
coming to see him.
Right. And what does he say? He goes, Karen, what am I doing here? I'm in fucking prison, and I can't, I can't control what somebody else from the outside is doing, right? I don't, And I said, I did what I did. Meech did what he did. It doesn't mean I'm not going to disrespect the man. And he did not. He's sitting there in prison, and you got a friend out there trying to get a third-party cooperation agreement. he's not controlling the thing, right? And he's not snitching. If somebody else wants to snitch and you get credit for it, that's still not snitching. You're just getting credit. I mean, to me, that seems like, wouldn't you, I would do that. I mean, I get credit for doing nothing? That'd be great. So even if he did get credit, which he didn't, because there was no third-party agreement, it's not on him. That's just that you have a loyal friend out there who wants to help you. So I don't buy all this bullshit. The bottom line is, Meech did not. I know who the snitches were, from our point of view. I know some of the other rappers who were snitches. I'll tell you, Meech didn't snitch. I mean, I remember getting the phone call when he got sentenced. 30 on the chin. They got consideration, he and his brother, because when you plead guilty in federal court, you get acceptance of responsibility, and that can bring it down. So yes, were they looking at life? Absolutely. If they could have pinned all the murders and everything else on them. But at the end of the day, 30 years, and then, the BOP has wide discretion. My understanding is that he was a model prisoner. I mean, no infractions, I can't walk down.
Well, that's not true, because I've read in the when he went to his he applied for a compassionate release too,
right.
And Dawn Eisen, the U.S. attorney from Detroit, she detailed and enumerated like multiple infractions. He had a knife in prison, a couple fights, and liquor and all of that, and he got denied the compassionate release because he wasn't in as bad as health as Terry. Terry got the compassionate release because I think all of his records from health services, he was overweight, and they got him up out of there. And Meech applied saying like, yo, me and my brother got sentenced together, so if he get a compassionate release, let me get one.
I got it backwards then. Okay.
And they was like, nah.
Well, yeah, and I knew Don had objected to his early release. I knew that. I didn't realize all those infractions, again, maybe towards the end. The bottom line is the BOP, he did what? He did
20 and some change? 20 flat?
20. No, he got 2009? Was it? 2000.
He fell in 05 and he got out in 25. He did 20.
Oh, that's right. We did get him into custody in 05. Yes, he got the credit for the time served.
Yeah.
So he did 20 years. Which is.
And all of his time cuts were legitimate. They were because I went through those.
There was time served. I remember when they got him, because they got him. I just left the DA's office when they arrested him, because it was on my warrant. I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, that was my contribution to the Detroit case. I don't think they used much of our wires. Our wires were good for the purposes of dismantling Atlanta. They were good for morale purposes. They were good for TDYs to Detroit, to Orlando, to South Carolina. They were good for as being a collecting house, So by the time I got everything, right? And so our files were, it was tailor-made. They were all collated, everything was together. And my affidavit, my warrant at that point, you started with 50 pages. I think we were at 300 pages, It was a detailed outline of the history of the Black Mafia family.
Within Atlanta?
Yeah, everywhere. I mean, we used everything that we used everything. So we had a timeline. I mean, it keeps coming up in my mind, the St. Louis Pig, when he got arrested up there. But we had everything. St. Louis, we had Los Angeles, we had trips to LA. Everything was detailed. I mean, we down to the minute. So when you looked at it, and Mara Shalop, who wrote the book, they got the Pulitzer, use that. That book is a broadening of our warrant. I mean, that warrant was provided the outline for the case. Now, the U.S. attorneys obviously do their own work, and I'm not taking any credit for that shit. But it was by the time Atlanta, my warrant was issued for his arrest, and that got sent. Then it was between the U.S. attorney's offices and their dick contest. So
you were already gone by the time Cuffy gets jammed up in St. Louis.
Cuffy got arrested in Is
it 13?
Yeah, so I was well gone. Hell, I was almost out the door as a lawyer at that point. Well, it was in 13, was it?
Yeah.
Because it was 11 that Jack retired, and then Keith, right. And then, so like I said, I don't know. I know that the allegations that Meech snitched Cuffy, but again, Meech is already in prison. I don't know how.
Well, I think the issue Cuffy has is that Meech sent Tammy to him, knowing, and Tammy was an undercover paid informant, as we, and she was supplying Keith Cromer with information on Cuffy.
Again,
while getting paid. Again, this is all in the Franks hearing.
Yeah.
And I read Jack Harvey's whole testimony, man. He's tight, man. The way you describe him.
Jack ain't gonna lie for anybody.
He was by the book, and he was on the stand. I read all of his testimony, and she helped him in another case with Terry White. But then when he retired, he turned her over to Keith, and she began to give information to Keith on Cuffy and tied the whole St. Louis thing down.
Right.
And I think that's where Cuffy is like, yo, you sent this girl to me, man.
Yeah, but see, and then the problem goes back to this. Meech at this point been in 8 years at this point, right? Been in custody for 8 years, 7 plus. One thing I've learned myself being in custody, everybody's an expert in the law the minute they get set up. They're up, everybody up in the cut knows the law, man. It's like when I got sent up there, it's like, oh, here's a Maharaja of the law, and you spend half my fucking time just telling everybody how wrong they are. But you got to know, he's got to know at this point. I mean, if Meech was getting third-party cooperation, he would have known. He wasn't getting it. He had no deal on the books. It's just, so what Tammy was doing was what Tammy was getting paid. I mean, people 100%. Like, what's her motivation if not Meech? What's everybody's fucking motivation?
Well,
what are the three motivations in this world? Sex, money, fame.
And she had his life rights at this time. She had Big Meech's life rights.
Yeah.
And his power of attorney.
Fame, fortune, and sex. It's the story of man and his downfall.
And you know what's crazy, Rand, man? The more I read this case, it's super interesting, number one, but I don't think anybody could know exactly who could come and say, like, yo, I know everything about this. I know this. I don't think anybody can, because it always takes a twist and a turn, man.
Jack Harvey, I do think Jack Harvey. I mean, Jack, it will, but I agree with you. If you could take Terry Meech, and Jack Sprain and put them all together, then they would do it.
You can figure it out.
But it's like I used to say, there's three sides of the story. What you say, what I say, and what God knows. It's all about perspective. I've never, again, I get what, I've had to catch up with it because of, talking about it. My thing about Meech is this. I live in a different, my brain is in a different world with this with regard to it. Because I've seen informants, I've seen people get killed for being informants. And I was talking to my son about this, about Meech, and he had a good point. He's like, well, don't you have a duty? He goes, shouldn't you, if you have an opportunity, correct this, correct it, because again, in this world, and they're BMF for life, they have blood oaths and shit. The man didn't snitch. This isn't some fucking game. This isn't some fucking movie out here. This is real world, and for, the Insta gangsters and the Facebook mafia people who think they're so fucking hard sitting on their couches and shit. This is real life. And people get really shot, people get killed for this shit. Before I'm gonna, I just think there's a responsibility before we talk. If you don't know, or if you know the opposite, I said, and I talked to Jack yesterday about this, Meech, because I had said on a previous documentary that I was under the impression that he had, and I misspoke, and he accepted his responsibility, which gave him the deduction. But the man didn't snitch. Tammy Cowens, her motivation is money. Look at what she's doing now. She's writing her book, and now she wants to have a spin-off show. Okay, and I remember when I heard that, I was like, who the fuck is that? She never came up in our shit. Jackson, yeah, she was important to him, but, and she has the life rights. But again, fame, fortune, sex. If it ain't one of those three, that's your motivation. The man took 20 on the fucking chin.
Well, 30. He was 30. And he
I know, but he did
20. Right.
He's still not out of custody. It's not like he and I are gonna be taking warm showers together in the wee hours of the morning. But we're not. We're on opposite sides of that spectrum. But still, I respect. I've said it before. I respect what it took to build what they built. If they had been, you take them and put them in a middle class family in Bloomington, Detroit, right? They're Fortune 500,
right?
They're giving $1 million endowments to Morehouse and shit, right?
I've always said that that the level of genius and organization that these guys, it requires a lot, man. Yeah. To manage that type of operation, man, and
to command that type of respect and loyalty. I mean, really, their downfall was just. I mean, the other guys, they didn't, Pig, they didn't talk.
Who's Pig?
He was, I can't remember his last name, his real name. They were pulled over in St. Louis, well before my case. That's when we determined, the hub, the routes they were taking to Atlanta. It was a St. Louis pullover.
How important was St. Louis in the BMF thing?
I don't know I don't know what they used in the federal prosecution. I was dealing with my own shit, and I just, but I mean, St. Louis was very important. It was important in my case because we could tie that, it's the St. Louis, and what was going on in St. Louis, we could tie some of that. It went into our affidavit, and we could make the connections between Terry, and I think Terry and Pig. When Pig got arrested with another guy, and I cannot remember his name, Terry and Meech, I think they got Terry on a phone call to Meech, or they got Terry talking to somebody else on a wire, right? And then talking about Meech is too flashy, he needs to slow shit down. That's that famous phone call they intercepted, and then Meech and Terry had their falling out. That's we were able to catch some of that, the remnants of that fallout on our wire. So again, when you're connected, the old connect the dots game. If you can connect the dots in a traditional conspiracy, you have your wheel hub, and everybody has to touch the center. But in a RICO or a continuing criminal enterprise, you got your bottom rung, right? Your bottom rung only has to touch the rung on top of it. So my son, to me, to you, to Wade, to Matt, to Matt's wife, to the guy delivering the groceries, all I got, my son's connected to the guy delivering the groceries. Right, under a CCE. They don't even have to know each other exist. It's a broad use of the conspiracy. You just got to show agreement between each one going up, and so St. Louis was very important. It connected Detroit to Atlanta, Detroit, L.A., Detroit, St. Louis, South Carolina, Orlando, Mexico. It was when you follow the hubs, you see the route. It made sense. It was the interstates.
But you never, in your wiretaps, Cuffy's name never came up in none of your stuff.
Never. In fact, it didn't come, like Jack said, it didn't even come up with him because I think it wasn't until much later. But to answer your question, and I've seen it, and speculating about it is one thing, I can tell you, like we talked off camera, if you go to Pacer, the Pacer login, on anybody, you'll see, it's not the world's best kept secret. You see somebody's name and you'll see all the entries. You can click on it, and as a member of the public, you can buy the document, et cetera, et cetera. If there's no hyperlink there, you'll still see something sealed document, closed hearing. There will always still be minutes, Judge so-and-so sealed, closed the hearing, but you'll see a notice for production of inmate to BOP, right? Or you can go in the BOP history and see that, the inmate was in town on this day, and there's a closed hearing with a sealed document with affirmations from the prosecutor, an agreement from no objection from the defense, and revised document, referencing document number XYZ. but these are all sealed. Well, obviously that's a sentence. You know, you can see that, there was cooperation done. Meech doesn't have any of that. He wasn't brought back for sentencing. There's not even in. So these trolls out there saying, "Oh, well, they could get rid of it." You know, they could do. You know, I could be a flamenco dancer, but I'm not, because there's no evidence. You know, these are the facts. You know, people want to. And again, you sit in your mother's basement, you type it on a computer, talking shit. It's not. It's just not true. You know, this is entertainment for everybody. This was my life. This is Meech's life. This was our life. You know, like T.I. says, it's my life, your entertainment. And it's real life with Meech. And man didn't snitch. It's like they got acceptance of responsibility. Say what you want about him. I wouldn't fuck with Meech. It's 20 years later, and I still don't talk shit about Meech. It was what it was, because it wasn't personal. It was professional. And Jack too. I was talking to Jack. Jack's prime motivation was we had a young lady, Misty Carter, who was murdered. Ulysses Hackett and Misty Carter, good girl from a good family, and guys came in. They thought he was snitching, and she just happened to be at the wrong place, and he'd been in bed with them at the time, and they murdered her.
Him too?
Him too, yeah. And the former mayor's son-in-law, Tremaine Graham, and there was two other guys, and and Jack promised her dad, I was talking about this the other day. He goes, I really wish. He goes, it just kills me. I promise you, we never got. They all went away, but not for that murder. The murder's never been. Nobody's ever taken that charge.
I think Brian had told me something about that too.
It's always been, and even our minimization. When I talked with the agents when we started this, was like, it was that important to Jack. Jack wanted everybody to know this wasn't just another fucking drug case. This was it was personal to the Carters, and I said to him, I said, the Carters are watching this. It's been all these years, but I got to think, that the fact that we're still talking about Misty, even though somebody wasn't officially charged with her murder, but the fact that they all went to prison, the fact that we did our damnedest, the fact that we're still talking about it and it still kills us that we didn't get that, that piece of paper, the finality of that, the closure. I said, I would hope that her family knows that, respects the fact that we did our damn. We did. Yeah, nobody took credit. Nobody sat there and said, yes, I did it. But we did our damnedest, At the end of the day, we can't control what the prosecutors in Detroit, what they pled out to. But, but the guys who did it, they did go to prison. I think two got out, one's in. Still, but I would hope that the Carters know that we still think about it, and whatever solace they, and I'm sure nothing will ever, closure, when you're a prosecutor in law enforcement, closure is such a bullshit, theory. It's like, you don't have closure. There's no such thing. Or people be like, oh, my heart breaks for this person. Well, or I stand with this person. Who gives a fuck who you stand with? They've lost a family member. It's one of the things that just drives me nuts, Get out there and do fucking something, or shut your fucking mouth. It's like, thoughts, prayers, hearts on Facebook. Who gives you fuck, until you spilled blood in the fucking mud. I don't want to hear it, Don't talk about what we did. We did everything right, That's my little tick about that.
Hey, Rand, I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, man, and I would love to talk to Jack Harvey, man.
I know. Well, Jack...
I would love to. So you make sure you tell him, man.
I told you.
I've read the Frank's hearing, man, cover to cover. The way I've covered this case, what I don't do, Rand, and I don't know, you watch some
I watched it. You got you put it out there.
I've been reading this shit line by line. I'm not putting up some crazy thumbnail and got music playing and I'm showing a meme. I'm going straight from the pacer.gov documents and, because I want to present it, just me, myself as a man, because I did federal prison time too, right? Cuffy's in the feds, Meech is in the feds. They know how this shit goes, that the paperwork is real important, right?
Exactly.
And you know what I'm saying? Your paperwork is your driver's license in prison, right? So, and I always, I fucks with Cuffy, right?
Yeah.
I don't know Meech, but he's welcome to come on my show and interview. But they know.
If you get Meech, I'll tell you this: if you get Meech, I think he and I we'll do one together, maybe.
Me, you, and Meech. All right.
If you get Meech in the grade, I've been asked, but yeah, we'll do it.
But I think they both appreciate, even though things I say may not, because in this social media thing, there's like cheerleaders, a point for Cuffy, a point for Meech. Yay, point, take a point away from Cuffy, take a point away. I don't do mine that way. I'm reading the shit straight up, raw,
right.
And whether they get a point or get a point deducted, I think they both respect me for the way I present. If I'm coming straight from the paperwork, it's not, my passion is not involved.
Sure.
You understand what I'm saying?
I agree. And, when you contacted me, and we're talking, and I said, I like, agree. And then you sent me the copy, and I saw them because I'd already seen all of them. Jack and I had already talked about them, and
seen all of what?
Oh, you're the ones about Cuppy and Meech.
Okay.
Right. We'd already done, and I can't. This is just me speculating, because Jack asked me, and I, addressed it a little bit, I think on Wade's, but Keith Cromer, it is what it is. He was a great guy, a great agent. We all have our traumas,
and we all make mistakes, especially when it comes to a woman. If you're a man,
and I think that's all I said about it then, and I think Jack's of the same opinion. Jack doesn't want to talk about it because let me tell you, Jack was devoted to God first, and then his friends, and then his job. Jack lives he's one of my heroes. He's just a great guy. He's just a good person. He's just been a great friend, and working with Jack, I imagine for me, it imagines what maybe people felt about Elliot Ness years ago. That's kind of the pedestal I put him on. Except even Ness, I think, has some vices. I'm not sure Jack does. I mean, when I cursed, when Jack and I were talking on the phone the other day, I must have said fuck about 4 times, and he's like, Rand, I'm going to hang up the phone if you do it again. There was always like, can you stop with the profanity? And I think the only time I ever saw him mad was when he finally grabbed my shirt one day. He was like, enough with the F word, He's just a good, he's unassuming. He was such a good investigator. I don't know that we'll ever have another one like him. And again, but that's right, and he just will not put himself in a position where he even has to talk bad about somebody. Even when he talks about this. And again, with Meech and stuff, I agree with you. I don't want to do anything that disrespect, and I don't think you did. Now, you got all these jerk-offs out here.
Right.
Talking about this shit. And again, it's, from the privacy of Big Mama's, basement, oh man, everybody's a rock star and shit.
Right.
Everybody's talking hard and shit.
Right.
On the comments.
In your Crocs and your pajama pants. Right.
But it's like, step the fuck up, motherfucker. I'm in Atlanta. You gotta come at me. I'm 53 years old. If by some chance I get the best of you, you just look like a punk.
Right. And
if you take me out, you just a 53-year-old white man. You get no points for that shit. And Meech, the thing about Meech, why I agreed to start talking again about it is this. A man's been in prison. He's been away from his son. I did 4, myself is well known. I did 4 different jumps, myself in county and shit. Just county, right? 8-10 days the max, right? In the hole and shit. The only thing goes to your fucking mind, and I'm in the hole and shit, is thinking about my boy.
Ain't no question.
And that was 10 fucking days.
Ain't no question.
And it was driving me crazy. All I can think about is him as a dad. He wants me out, and in a minute he gets out, everybody starts shitting on him, I'm talking about him. Like, let the man, if he was me, all I want to do is be with my son. I just want to be, and did his time. And that's how I feel about it. And speculating, I agree. It looks fishy and shit. And again, you also know the mindset, when you're up in custody, when you're in the cup, man, there are very few things you can, if you don't have an appeal left, right? If you have another way, what are you going to do? You're going to focus on the motherfucker who put you there. And you got a lot of time on your hands. And after you can't sleep anymore, you know, it's just, what are you going to do? You're going to fixate. And, you know, you get that custody mentality, you know, that domesticated mentality, you know, the institutionalized, where all of a sudden everything makes sense to you. Like, oh man, no. Well, this guy said hello to the hot dog vendor on the street, and he says he know, you know, everybody makes sense. And you also know too, everybody's in your fucking ear in prison. You know, everybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like, you know, sort of like my.
But yeah, man, back on
Sorry,
Jack Harvey, and we can close after this. Is that when I read I read all of his cross examination from all of the defense attorneys in St. Louis, and he comes across just off the paper. I've never met the man. I don't know you. I've just met you this morning, right before this interview. So want to, you know, qualify that. But just coming off the paper, Jack Harvey comes off as like this straight up and down, like 6 o'clock dude, man. That like he's just gonna tell it what it is and let it be what it's gonna be.
Exactly. I had Jack on a case. I think it was Forsyth County in a jury trial where he provided support. He didn't even have to, but he provided support. That was a nice thing. By being part of a task force, they would come up for us, and I had him on the stand just because I wanted to have. He had something relevant to say, and the way he painted it was a good case. It was a good case, but it wasn't a great case at that point. But Jack got off the stand. Jack testified. Thank you, Your Honor. And he gets off, and he's walking down. And again, you would think he was you would just think he was just a normal dude. He's down the street, and he gets off, and the jury starts clapping. And they're like, he was just that good, you know. And Judge looks at me, I'm like, the defense attorney looks at me and goes, well, we'll enter a plea. You know, it was just, and Jack looked at me and goes, what did I do? You know, and he's like, were they clapping for me? Well, yeah. It was like, it was just, and it wasn't anything he said. It was just, he looked at you, you know, and I can't describe it. You meet somebody like that in your life who was a good example. When I had my problems, I cut him out of my life because I just, you know, they say, the Bible says, darkness can't stand the light. I mean, but the minute I reached back out to him, he was there again. You know, he's just.
Well, tell him I asked about him, man. And tell him he's definitely invited on the show. I wanted to, you know, I text you before we came to invite him to come down. I'd like to meet him, man.
Well, it's Easter, so if I know Jack, he's at church, probably feeding people and doing his charity work and stuff. And I will let him know. I'm sure when he will watch this, I know I'm going to get blown up on this and be like, well, Rand, I didn't say this. I'm going to get another 15 pages of fucking notes I got to correct. You know, be like, well, you know, you got 20 years to fix this. And, but some things I told him I'm sticking to, like he did ride me hard about this shit for years. He's like, it didn't even start. Like, Jack, you were on it forever. But yeah, no, Jack, and I think you got to talk to Burns at some point.
Yeah. Shout out to Burns too, man.
He's a character. Ask him why he spent so much time at the mall.
Hey, Rand, I appreciate you, man.
Thanks,
all right, peace, man.